Michael Mervosh, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. Listener Dan Gross wrote to say how impressed he was by your work and urging me to have you on as a guest. Plus, I'm a big fan, a longtime fan of Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey, and I taught a class on myths, dreams, and symbols that I would always work that into. And Hero with 1,000 Faces was a required book in that class. And yet, as I look through your material, I'm really impressed by what a fresh take you've brought to that whole set of teachings. So I'm really excited to talk to you. But let's step back before we get into all of that. And maybe you can tell us a bit about your background, your educational background, your training, et cetera, that got you to this place.
Well, how I began this work was I was working in a inpatient rehabilitation center for drug and alcohol treatment many moons ago. It was 25 years ago, I guess. And as a part of that work, I decided to both start a clinical training in Gestalt therapy at the time, and at the same time are working with family constellations. And then we built a ropes course on our site. Mm-hmm. And so those combinations started to cook, and we were doing intensive works. I was working in the family treatment program. And I noticed that if we could put our people up in the air, they move through things a little more quickly, or we get to the heart of the matter more quickly in elements that would provide the right support, the right balance of support and challenge that being inside four walls sometimes can't provide us with. And that sort of began to seed the work that just grew naturally over a period of years in a number of different ways. But
yeah, because it looks very much like it's like a lot of it is adventure training, if you will. And I can see how that would have evolved from the ropes course.
Yeah, that's in the wilderness work that we've evolved it off. That was the birthplace, was the ropes courses, but it's whatever can ignite that spirit of adventure to get us from what's most familiar to something completely foreign and unknown to us.
Yeah. Do you remember when you first learned about the hero's journey?
Well, like you, I stumbled upon Campbell because it wasn't a part of any set curriculum. I grew disenchanted with traditional academic learning because when I started to read Campbell, this man was obviously on fire.
Yeah.
and and had self-directed his own learning, and the words jumped off the page, for me in ways that nothing else did before. And I've always loved learning, and so I've enjoyed learning, but I didn't know that I could be so captured by what somebody was portraying. And so the whole myth of the journey came about where I decided to go for 11 days on my own vision quest. And having done a number of different experiences, it started an awakening process for me. Wanted to do this work, and I started off doing it with men primarily, and then I've also done this now with co-ed, and we have a women's group. But I went 11 days in the woods with a group of men and had my own really profound journey into paying attention to what mattered most, and that birthed the ground for my vision for wilderness work.
Yeah. Wow.
And at the time when I read Campbell, and there's so many brilliant thinkers that I think were influenced by Campbell, I was struck by how deeply engaging the philosophy was, and the mythological aspects of this are, for me, just really rich. But I didn't know anybody that was actually creating scenarios where you can, enter the forest at the darkest point, like the Holy Grail, and go a way that would assure that you wouldn't come out the same. And,
yeah. Now, you mentioned Vision Quest, and there are groups that have, that offer vision quests. And had you been exposed to that already, or?
I had to some degree, but the gentleman that led my vision quest, Joseph Jastrab, has now works for us and offering these transformation experiences. He retired from that work and came on board with the vision I had. I sort of had the vision for him to do this, and he had the vision. So you do it, and I'll help.
Yeah. Was there a particular aspect of the hero's journey, as Campbell lays it out, that particularly spoke to you?
I guess I would say a particular aspect of it. No, I'll tell you what spoke to me was a phrase that captured me that I still revolve around a phrase he spoke that captured me and that catapulted me on the journey. So I guess it was the call to adventure. That was it for me. But he said that, we're here to embody the zeal of eternity for incarnation in time. And I remember reading, I'm thinking, what is he talking about? But why can I not stop thinking about that?
Yeah.
And so the idea that we would have a chance to deeply embody the eternal world, and that we're to be a vessel for that in some mysterious but very pragmatic way. There's things that we can do to elicit that, and then things that we're to return and contribute to society, so that we're not just spiritual junkies, but to really anchor this work in something meaningful when we return from our adventures.
I had planned to ask you if there was a moment when you got sort of the call to adventure, but it sounds like it was, in fact, your discovery of Joseph Campbell.
It was. It was the first time that. Actually, it wasn't the first time it woke up. It's the first time that I woke up to something and I knew I was awake. I think I had done things before that awakened me. I just either didn't know what to do with it or didn't understand that I was awake. And I came from a traditional upbringing and was the first one in my family to be educated. And I come from a family of steel workers, and so to venture in these ways seemed superfluous at first.
You live in Pennsylvania, maybe that's why.
Pittsburgh, yeah.
Steel country.
Steel country, at least it was back then when I was young.
Yeah. Now you have a foundation that you're executive director of, and just kind of tell us a bit about that.
Well, what we do, and I think what we're known for it, is providing opportunities for people to live into a journey one way or another, and to think about it and to have the consciousness and understanding of it is a great start. But we're looking for ways to provide people in an active engagement, either in a profound way, in a wilderness setting, online, through a computer course, through something they might read from us. We're just looking to engage the journey. But our mission, David, is to do that in a particular way. We're pretty committed to redefining heroism, as something that myth is dying. The myth of the hero is a dying myth. And our philosophy and our mission is to say that we're not to be more and more heroic and superhuman. The myth of the superhero is dead. We're to be more and more human, and to know more and more our place in humanity. The ensemble hero. I had lunch a couple years ago with Bob Walter, the president of the Joseph Campbell Foundation, and he was talking about this. He was telling me a story about interviewing William Shatner, and William Shatner was talking about how Captain Kirk was the hero, and Bob Walters was saying, no, the Enterprise was the hero. You couldn't, Kirk couldn't go where no man had gone before without an enterprise. And the people on the enterprise. And that's been our philosophy as well, that you have to be a part of an ensemble. You can go somewhere for yourself that only you can go, but you can't do it by yourself. So we're really looking to reshape what it means to be heroic in today's time, and not to look to one person. I think, people look to Obama in some way, like he was one man, and a one man today can't change the world in the same way. They've got to work with the ensemble and get the ensemble to shift.
Yeah. You've got some of your writing or maybe all of your writing, I don't know, is on your website. And I found myself just really drawn into it. You write so powerfully and so well. In fact, it caused me to go to Amazon and say, well, maybe he's got a book. This is a guy who maybe has written a book. What I found was a 21-page leadership guide, probably people that are involved in one of your activities.
I just came back from there with that. Yes.
Yeah. So I paid the 99 cents. It's a Kindle thing. Oh, what the heck. I haven't had a chance to read it yet though, but I felt like I got a lot just scrolling down through the page, that center page, and I was really drawn in, and I've sent it to a couple of friends and suggested that we have some discussion about it. And I'm wondering, in the workshops that you do, the wilderness journeying workshop, if there's a way that you map the stages of the journey with experiences in that wilderness workshop. And I wrote down the stages as you have them in the piece that you wrote. The call, the crossing the threshold, facing the threshold, guardians, the gateway of wholeheartedness, which seems like really your own contribution. You don't take the journey takes you. Entering the dark forests of the psyche, disorientation, the terrain of dilemmas, the path and the paradox of wandering. Love the story about how you were lost in the woods. That is such a great story. I've had my own experiences. And finally, maybe the idea of the boon. Would it be possible for us to step through those here in a way that feels alive to you? Maybe because I know you go through this stuff a lot, and so how can we make it be alive for you and for me?
We're about to find out.
Okay, good. So we've spoken about the call, and so in the context of your wilderness retreats, I suppose the call is the people who come.
Exactly, it's already happened.
Yeah,
we don't really take much responsibility for that part. We just create the invitation for people to come, whether it's word of mouth that often happens, or for someone who stumbles upon it, and trust that they feel called to step somewhere. There's not a lot of people that sign up for 7 days to go somewhere they haven't been, where they don't know what's going to happen. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we start with the threshold crossings, where we spend the better part of 24 hours and to 48 hours shifting our spiritual center of gravity from everything that we're familiar with to being in a zone literally unknown to us with what's about to unfold. And we practice that by entering a now point and saying, wherever you've been and whatever you've failed at and whatever your successes are don't really matter right now. They're not defining you. What name you use, how you choose to identify yourself to other people on a journey is purely up to you, and you can start anew. And we do a series of rituals that some of them I won't name here because it kind of would ruin the experience for someone to expect it. But
I understand.
It's literally a stripping away of whatever has just taken place, where people arrive in a vehicle and get out of the vehicle, and the staff would take the vehicle, take their things, put them where they need to go, and they would literally start their journey right then and there.
Okay.
On arrival. And that we would start to venture into some woods, into thick dark woods, and or underground, literally go under the ground. before we start talking.
Wow. You have caves there?
We have caves there. We have cliffs. And we have water. We have forests, lush green mountain forests. So we have all of the elements of nature, and we work with, earth, wind, fire, and water in those profound ways. So and then we work in small groups as well.
About how many people would be in a typical, the whole group, the large group?
We had, this year we had, there's a total of 70 of us there.
Oh, wow.
On the mountain from all over Europe, South America, all over the States, Canada. And, some of them are staff, facilitation staff. Some of them are support staff. We cook our own food. We set up every element our way. And then we had 4 groups of 10 men, and we had 8 young teenagers as well.
That's wonderful. I'm guessing that there must be a lot of word of mouth. And when I went to your website, I don't see a lot of marketing. A lot of websites you
Right.
go to, and it's marketing. And that's really not on your website. And yet it's very compelling. I suspect that people discover you.
Yeah, that's
work.
It's, yeah. And maybe some members of my board would like to point that out to me too.
Right.
So, and that's, partly by design, and that if it's simply a marketing thing, we have to filter, we affects the filter of who would come in.
Sure.
And, because for me, when I went on my particular journeys that I have done, not only did I want to be there for the sake of the elements that were being provided, but I wanted to know who else wanted to go on something like that, who these people were.
Yeah.
Because it's people come from very different reasons, very different walks of life, and the diversity is absolutely critical for a rich adventure. Yeah,
you mentioned that there are teens there. What about the other end of the age spectrum? What does it go up to?
I guess our oldest was 77 this year, but typically in the 70s.
Okay. That's where I am.
If a physical, a physical limitation would prevent maybe, but most of the work is inward, but we would max out everybody's physical potential in one way or another. It's just wherever that is.
Yeah.
So that's everyone's on the same playing field when they're completely spent in the same way.
So let's talk about the threshold guardians in this context.
So something that someone may be there to work with is to face a fear that they've had in their life, or something that's been stalking them, it's troubling them. And so we would look at a fear. And the reason why I think that's critical to do is because before we can have a genuine boon, something that's really going to renew us in a meaningful way, which would be the newest thing arriving in our life, we typically have to face the oldest thing on the way to it. So whatever the oldest thing that I carry that is no longer of use in me, that's holding me back or would tend to thwart me, that I'm most identified with, is going to show up one way or another. Mm-hmm. So we might as well just go get them. So, and to start facing whatever those fears are and naming them. And, if it's heights, we'll go, if it's reflective of a physical element, we'll use the physical element to concretize that experience in a way that really puts it in the body in a way you'll never forget.
Yeah.
If it's dark places, depressive places, will go under the ground. If it's tight places, that will work as well. And as I said, we have a number of different ways of doing that. We'll climb. We have ways of climbing into some heights that we use that are spectacular and challenging. But everything that we do, David, has to do with the next doable step. And each doable step we discover what that is. And what I've found is many of us will fear it will seek out the impossible rather than wrestle with what's possible. And what's possible in a group is far more possible than any one individual can muster on their own. So if I'm working with with my fear of rejection, then I would really have to face how I'm received.
Can you share with us when you
end up working?
Yeah, when you began this work, what was the fear for you that you had to overcome?
Nobody would come. Nobody would be interested in it.
Uh-huh.
But personally, for example, my fear of heights, which is symbolic of a fear of success, for me, of heights. But that's what I thought I had. I in my mind, I had a fear of heights. And what I got to find out is I had a fear of fear. And so when I was in a high place, completely supported, I could not stand myself shaking because I began to shake with fear.
Right.
And I could feel my own displeasure with myself, my own rejection of myself, and a shame that I would be this afraid, which didn't trouble anybody else there nearly as much as it was troubling me. And then when I got okay with shaking and I stopped judging my shaking, and I was more interested in the interest of others and their compassion for what I was attempting to do, that changed something for me, where I didn't fear myself fearing. And it really was an opening, and has been an opening for me, where fear doesn't, I still get afraid. I feel more vulnerable. The older I get, the more vulnerable I feel. And yet now it's just not that important to me how afraid I am.
Yeah.
But that was a clear example of how much that was. And then to watch how much the ways I told myself about my fear, the way I talked, I identified with my fear, I had to undo that. And in working with others, it's really striking to see how they're afraid of being afraid of heights. And some people don't even have that fear.
Yeah, I think I do. And I had an experience that really is similar to what you're talking about. I was actually leading a master's retreat in a mountainous area, and I saw this cliff face, and I was saying, wow, that would be fun to go up there. I was trying to encourage one or two other guys to go with me, and this guy was saying, no, that's a technical climb. You need ropes to do that. And I said, no, it looks like you just go there and you go over there and then you go over there. This should be a piece of cake. And so fortunately, this guy came with me as I set out on this climbing. And I was about halfway up the face of this, I guess it was a cliff. It was something with a very extreme angle. And I looked down and I realized, oh my God, I can't get back down from here.
Yeah.
Because when you're climbing, you can see your hands and you can see where to grab, and you can look down and see a place for your foot. But because the head's on the top of your body.
Yeah.
The head is not down by your feet when you want to go back the other way. And I froze. And then I started to tremble. And fortunately, talk about the help of other people. This fellow who was supposedly my student, supposedly, he said, well, I'm okay. I'll go up to the top and I'll find an alternate route for coming down. And so he scrambles up to the top and he says, oh yeah, come on up. There's a great way. So that gave me enough pluck to make it up to the top. But it turns out that he was lying. There really wasn't a better way down.
That was a good move.
And I'm up there. I'm really sweating it now.
Oh, man.
And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be so humiliating if they have to bring in a chopper or something. And also, it's like your story of getting lost. It's like no water bottle, nothing, no warm jacket. It's starting to get chilly. It's getting later. So that was my story. What he did was he was able to. We went down a slightly different way, and he said, I'll sort of talk you down, and I'll kind of brace, and so we took a baby steps down, and he got me down, and I'm forever grateful. I'm not sure if I got the great spiritual lesson out of that or not, but it did.
I would say, like David, I had a similar experience in Heights like you that way. And when I said, what am I learning from this? And as I'm learning that I can get through, I got through it. We have one of these footbridges as well, where with significant height.
I've seen the picture of it, and it's, I can think that would be challenging.
The first thing I learned was to get across it.
Yeah.
But then I would say, if the second time, if you would go again, knowing what you were going to face and taking more resources and accessing more resources within yourself and being allowed to see these people as resources to you with the we would be a very different experience. So that, what you had in that experience and what I had in mine initially was an I experience. Mm-hmm. And the I experiences always go poorly.
That's interesting.
Because it goes poorly because either I start to fail because the I is always inadequate, or the I succeeds and really believes itself to be more than it is.
Yeah.
So when we're working in the group, the real element is always the ensemble, the group.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And then until I can join with you, and I'm with you, and I'm with the few others that are with us, and we understand that this won't go well unless we all cooperate. Then the whole thing starts to change, and I'll do things I would never do. That's part of the heroic oneness, right? Where I can identify with you, and I would do for you what I wouldn't have done for anybody 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I was so interested in creating something so visceral like this now is because we only have war for this.
Yeah.
For the same thing.
Yeah.
And, Sebastian Junger just wrote a book recently called Tribe about the spirit of belonging, which is that it's the trouble with war is that people can't feel the same way of embracing one another outside the theater of war. And so then we have this destructive, way that we need to feel a sense of deep connection. And so here, the threat it's some perceived threat to annihilation to the ego primarily, not literally. And everyone is relatively safe in any of our things that we do. We don't have any physical disasters. It's the adventure of saying, oh my God, I can't handle this. And what does that mean about me if I can't? Well, it means you're not connected to the right source. And that's what we redefine that over and over again, a number of times in a day. And then we let, the dark forest and then is going, once we cross that threshold, it says, we're going to go where you don't know yourself. You won't know how to navigate this. And whatever that's going to be for you, or, if we all go under the ground and turn the lights out, none of us will know the way. Mm-hmm. And then let's see what it's like to not actually see anything and navigate it. And it's profound what starts to open when we give over to letting the psyche just start taking over.
Yeah. You've got another stage here that you wrote about. I don't know if you intended it to be a stage or not, but I love the phrase, the gateway of wholeheartedness. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about that.
So I'll share a story from the journey with one of this. I'm still in touch with him to this day. A really lovely man. He's about 70. I think he's 79 right now. He's a Franciscan friar, and he was seeking out a journey, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago. And one of the things that he had a tendency to do that he was minimizing was he liked to gamble. And he was going to casinos, and he justified it because if he won, he would donate the money to his parish. And so So we were confronting his gambling issue to some degree about what had him in there, to feel alive. He was going to feel alive. And so, Rumi has this poem about how, you have to gamble everything for love. If you don't gamble wholehearted love, then you're going to be half-hearted, and half-heartedness will never touch majesty. And you will never know your own majesty. And you need wholeheartedness to know your own majestic nature, not your ego ideal of what you think you would be, something great, but just the transcendent sense of oneness that you can feel in majesty. So the body has to ante in some way to that. I would say it was your way of initiating yourself, maybe. It's into something.
One of many. Yeah.
That, here you are, this rock face is your God,
Yeah, really.
And to say this thing is not going to be controlled by you, and it's far greater than you, and now you know it.
Yeah. At some later point, I think it was later, before, I'm not sure which, I think it was later, I decided to become a glider pilot, and not a hang glider, but an airplane without a motor where they tow you up in the sky. And I remember that when it was finally time for me to do my solo, so there I am alone, and the fear starts to come up, and I'm kind of talking to myself and saying, okay, David, well, this is it. They don't have a ladder tall enough to reach you. You don't have a radio. So you better just really pay attention and do everything that you were taught, which was part of why I put myself into that, because I was aware of how my mind would tend to wander, and maybe not as good a listener as I was supposed to be as a professional and so on. And I thought, I'm going to put myself in this situation where my life is going to depend upon my ability to pay attention and follow instructions.
Amen. I've had a pilot's license, so I understand that predicament. Yes.
Okay.
So it's that same thing that that we're looking for that one way or another, and if we don't have vital, obviously, life-giving means of doing that, then the only other thing we can do is the life destroying means to do that, to create aliveness.
What I'm realizing is that in the two examples that I gave, it was pretty much a solo thing.
Yes.
Fortunately, that. I did have a teacher for the flying and the guy who accompanied me, but I have to think more about what you're saying about the group, even though I've worked with groups, done group work all my professional life.
Mm-hmm.
But I think inside me, maybe there's this individual thing that says, oh, you've got to prove that you can do it on your own. And
I think many of us carry the old myth.
Yeah.
And believing that there's a yield in it, and for me, there was a self-sufficiency is important to know that I'm a grown adult and I can make my own way in the world. But the limitation of it is that I can't do nearly what I can do if we're on the ensemble of, if I describe some of the cliffs that we would go into, most people are going to tell me I could never do that, and it's simply not true. It's just that the I can't really ever do it very well. Mm-hmm. And the connection to the we, even in a physical limitation, to say maybe you don't have the strength anymore or the coordination to do something, but the fact that you would be in an ensemble with 5 people on your climb who are connecting to one another, and all they care about is where everybody is and what's waking up in the moment. Not how far or how high we get, or if we're 3 feet off the ground, but we're really flying. That's the important thing, as opposed to now we're at the top, and now what are we going to have to do next to feel alive?
Yeah.
So we're using those illustrations to be a metaphor that I can tap into outside of time to keep renewing me.
Yeah. You mentioned that poem by Rumi, and you've got a number of lovely poems interspersed in that writing on your page. I don't know if you're one of those guys who's memorized a lot of those poems or not. I'm not, but if you are, feel free to sprinkle them in here anywhere that you wish.
Okay, I will. And just this is another example of the journey that that I would tell you about. That my identity has to change for me to grow, and to see myself as a different kind of man than I am has required the faces and bodies of others who reflect these realities back to me. And I grew up in the sporting world in the steel mills of Pittsburgh. And if you would have said to me, do I like poetry? I would have told you I do not like poetry. I do not read poetry, and I don't like poetry.
Yeah.
So when I listened to David White read a poem by David Wagner, I woke up. That was one of my moments of awakening. It was the poem Lost from the segment. What do you do when you're lost in the woods? What do you do? Well, the poem's speaking to me because I'm lost in my life. I just don't know it, right? So what do you do when you're lost in the woods? And it was a Northwest Indian teaching story that the elders taught to the young ones about what to do in the woods. He says, well, when you're lost in the woods, you stand still. You stand still, you become still, because the trees ahead, the bushes beside us, they're not lost. They're not lost. You're lost. And wherever we are, it's called right here. And it's happening right here, right now. And whenever you lose it, you can come back again, just saying, right here, right now. So they said, no two trees are the same to the ravens, and no two branches are the same to the wrens. So if what these trees or bushes are doing are lost on you, then you are lost. So he says, you stand still, you become still, you quiet yourself inside. You let the forest find you. The forest knows where you are. The forest knows where you are. Let the forest come to you. And, that in many ways is the work that we're looking to do, that we're waking up in, people's we're vitality makers. I mean, that's what we're looking to do, waking up people's personal myths. But I can't tell anybody when they come to the journey how they're going to wake up, because I have no idea, which people don't believe, because synchronicity is so profound. But I don't know. It's the synchronicity that's going to shake us all awake, based on or the synchronicity of our conversation, the way it's flowing, because, I didn't know what we were going to talk about before.
Right.
And you're choosing things to spark something that sparks something in me and you. And then we put nature into that. And if we put a sense of risk, that we're on the edge of something and we're all in, and that wholeheartedness to an experience to say, all right, let's just go somewhere, you and I, that we wouldn't ever go and we don't know, is going to have it. That's the wholeheartedness of a risk that's going to open the doors to something unknown to us in the psyche that's going to come forward.
Yeah. So
those are the conditions we create.
Because routine and habit are deadening. They don't require aliveness or thought. We just kind of go in our groove. And so one of the words that you use is disorientation. I guess that's one of the things that needs to happen to wake a person up.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you and I have probably lived long enough to come across many people who want to change and are interested in change and want to do something different, but would not want to undo something that they always do to be available for the different thing to happen.
Yeah.
The hardest work is the undoing of what we're already always doing, and to know what that is. And for me, it's that, what Campbell said, if you want to deprive yourself of an experience, then expect it. So then you can't really let something come to you, because you have an expectation for something else to happen. Undoing an expectation, undoing my ways of knowing and understanding, going and orienting towards the unknown doesn't mean that I'm stupid or ignorant or uninformed. It's the courage that it takes to say, I don't know yet. I want to be humble. I want to lower myself and humble myself to be one with the earth. I want to inherit the vibration of the earth and be shown through my unconscious ways. I want it revealed to me, which is what the enchantment is. And synchronicity comes into place. So we're looking all the time on the first 2 days of our journey to undo anything. Well, what time's lunch? Well, I don't know. I mean, are you hungry now? Like do you need food? Is that important to you right now? Or like, what's right now and nowhere else, and only right now for now? And undoing anything else that's not about this moment right here, right now, between us, and until there's a reason to have to step out of it. And then we take a break, and then we come right back to now and see what's about to unfold that we can't see coming.
Now, you've been doing this for 25 years, so I would think there'd be a certain amount of worn grooves for you. How do you keep this alive for you, for yourself?
Well, unfortunately, I don't really have that capacity to keep doing the same thing. So there's a new way of doing it every time, you know, and it feels like that. It feels like the price of admission, you know, so that we change our adventures up, our approaches up every time we do it. There's a new way of doing it, a new attitude about it, a beginner's mind, and it's like saying, well, I guess it's true if we've been to a really good restaurant and you know, we never know what chef is showing up that day for the meal. We get something different all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, we change it up all the time.
So you, and when you change it up, you don't know how it's going to turn out. So that's kind of putting you on the edge of fear again. Right?
Every time. Yeah. And we're just willing to be uneasy about it.
Okay. I liked your discussion of the terrain of dilemmas. That was an interesting phrase, the terrain of dilemmas.
Well, you know, most of us try to solve things by getting rid of things. And it doesn't really work in the psyche. You know, I have a clinical practice. It's always about the mother, right? Well, it's not only about the mother, it's about her unconscious. The mother's unconscious that's in us, and it's unconscious. We can't get rid of that stuff. This stuff is woven through us, and and in the richness of it, we're going to be troubled. There's an expression in the Upanishads that, well, in the Catholic tradition that I come from, you know, we have I think it's in Luke, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be open to you. Mm-hmm. Well, in the Upanishads, they say, seek and you shall be troubled. And in the trouble, you will find. Knock and you will awaken something up that's going to trouble you. And in the trouble, the doors will open to you. Mm-hmm. You know, so in dilemmas, we're called to things that are calling us to become more complex, more enriched. Why you would do a journey, why you would do all the adventures that you've done throughout your life and keep seeking out more, is that sense of complexity and richness and renewal. Our tendency, unfortunately, in order to feel secure, is to cut off processes and reduce them and simplify them and shut the doors and get answers and polarize, which, you know, we see everywhere now. So in the terrain of dilemmas, finding the right trouble means that I've got to do the kind of wrestling and the kind of searching and the kind of thing that has no immediate answer. Like if we go into a cave and turn off all the lights and find our way, we're not finding our way out right away. But we can move around and we can explore, because something's going to wake up if we don't have an easy answer, an easy solution. So we're looking for trouble that's worthwhile, that's going to awaken consciousness, because this is where the when I write about a stage of the journey, it's the adventures and the ordeals. And the understanding is any worthwhile adventure is going to have an ordeal, like the ones you were describing for you and for me. But if we have a worthwhile ordeal, an adventure can awaken in it. And the exact adventure that could yield a boon that we would never anticipate getting. That's the function of a proper ordeal, rather than something just to make us miserable or defeated or frustrated.
Yeah.
So dilemmas really serve that. It's like the worthiest challenge that provides no immediate answer, right? A question is to give us the quest and to take us into an unknown to awaken something. So that's what our dilemmas do.
Yeah. Another phrase that I liked was the path and the paradox of wandering.
Yeah. Yeah.
The paradox of wandering.
So, I train clinicians, and, we believe we're supposed to know things. And we're so afraid if I sit with you for 2 minutes in a conversation, whether it's social or professional, there's nothing happening. Like, well, or I'm supposed to know what to do. I should be more socially adept. I should be more professionally informed. Whereas the ability to unknow, to be in the unknowing of things or be with the unknowable frees us up to be present to everything we can get to learn to know that presents itself to us, rather than imposing this will to know onto our experience, which is so much of what we do. So the wandering that we would do in the woods would be to go far enough into the woods where most of us, including sometimes myself, don't know exactly where we are. And now that we're not exactly sure where we are or exactly how we'll get back, let's have a consult. Now let's see what's really here and how this is true for our lives, or what's familiar and what's underneath all of this. And let's see what it yields. Mm-hmm. So the wandering is anything to get us away from the familiar.
You mentioned your work as a therapist, and so that's another intriguing area for us to explore here. To you, I assume the way that you do therapy is much informed by all the stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Is there a school of thought that you subscribe to that is?
Oh, yeah. A lot of them. A lot of body-centered psychotherapy, Jungian analysis, object relations, all of that. I think it's taking all of that and getting to the fundamental ground underneath it that has to do with a living myth, things that are truer than fact. And, what I would say to the people that I work with is, if we're just going to treat your symptoms, it's a really low aim. We could do that. I don't really like just to do that, but if that's what you kind of want, okay, like you want to be less anxious. All right, well, we can work on you being less, strategies for you to become less anxious, but can we listen to the song of your anxiety, and understand the stories attached to it and the threads, that may be a boon under there that you can't experience positively yet, that you interpret negatively. So it would be, for me, it's the frame of reference to say, like, if I think of you other than a collection of your symptoms and your definition of your pathology, who are you and how would you be worth knowing?
Mm-hmm. Lovely, lovely. I suppose we should talk a bit about your psychoenergetics training that you do that spreads over 4 years. That sounds like a big undertaking. And who are you training to do what?
Well, we have a training in the States and we have a training in Europe, and we're training people more from a clinical perspective now, looking through that clinical lens into the mystery, into the unknowing, into depth processes to create awakening experiences for people. And so that we're working right now with the hysteric character structure. For example, a commonly ignored character issue for many people, and understanding what makes a hysteric character tick the way they tick and what are the typical problems of a hysteric character. So for us,
say a little bit more about that, because a lot of people listening that's not going to bring up the same maps that you have in your head about that.
So for someone who is profoundly hysteric, they have a tendency to revel in their childhood childlike identification. Very delightful, engaging, friendly people, very theatrical. and very much inclined to see everything in life as much bigger than it really is.
Hmm.
And this unconscious celebration of the innocence of childhood, and the hysteric character will struggle in intimacy, particularly viewing sexuality as good and healthy, will have a really a conflicted relationship with their own sexuality. But it's an unconscious need to experience innocence. And so we're working with understanding the dilemmas of that, how it's a character, how it's something that's got to be worked throughout a lifetime, how you help people step out of, what makes someone willing to relinquish this childlike desire to return to a time when it was all just innocent and pure, and you see this a lot in religion, actually. We're going to give you the promise of heaven. You just got to get through this miserable, hardship, and it will all be good later, which doesn't always work out for people.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like that work is also informed in some ways by the hero's journey.
It is, and it's from the standpoint of it's to say what allows people to bear becoming more and more human. That how do we rather than try to change the world, change our ability to bear what's happening in the world. How can I bear my own grief better? How do I understand working with stages of grief? And what allows me to let go so that I can see my grief as a sense of being true to myself rather than simply an experience of loss. And we'll work with anger and hostility and aggression. And we work with that both in the journey in intense ways on wilderness settings and in these training settings to work with embodying aggression and allowing someone to be withstood in their aggression, and as hostility as being a starting point of a process that has yet to unfold, as opposed to a divisive endpoint. That's because we all try to destroy what we can't secure. Is a way that we would understand that in our psychoenergetics training. If I feel like I can't really connect with you and I really want to be with you, then I'll have some way of destroying things between us, or the way I think about you, or my active acts of hostility.
Psychoenergetics suggests bioenergetics, and I wonder, have you been influenced by that?
Yes.
As well?
Yes, Lowen's work with bioenergetics right before him as well. But the psychoenergetics is working with the unconscious processes and the energy of the body. The energetics have to do with what we're embodying in our energy system in the body, and how the body mind works together. The unconscious processes that want to play itself out through our bodies, including illness and sickness.
Do you have any plans for the future? Do you?
Oh, well, maybe getting this book written, David.
So that is an issue. Yeah. I would think all you'd have to do is compile what you have written. You've got a book there.
Yeah, it's the time to do it because, I've been such a field worker. I'm doing these groups, and my practice here and these trainings is I'm in the field too much to be, there is a good bit written, and I'm pulling it together and looking to tell, what's the unique perspective and unique story that I want to tell through it.
Yeah.
But the future of this is really being able to expand. We're slowly growing our wilderness work in some ways to be one end of the bridge where people can have some profound awakening experiences that they could live out into their futures, and then working online as well with people who would never have the means or the ability or the interest in going that far out and saying, we're just going to follow these stages on an online web course and community broadcast, and then bring people on who are working with these aspects in their life, and I work with them on screen.
Yeah. How's that gone? I recently did an interview just a couple back with someone who's championing online work via tools like this, Zoom, Skype, HIPAA compliant video things. Does that feel effective to you, or?
It feels worthwhile to me. I have my concerns about it, and I would rather not do it. But I also feel a responsibility because we can gather people together, especially if we've been in person. Ideally, I think it works better if you and I were in a group together somewhere else, and then I'm working with groups online.
Mm-hmm.
But then we know that we're going to be back in person again. Some ways, I'm finding that to be an important way of threading experiences that we couldn't otherwise have. But the screen mediation, as you know, we would be enjoying our conversation. In my mind, I would be enjoying my time with you more in person. But at the same time, I'm also enjoying this because I feel like I can feel you. I can feel your resonance in my ears. I can get a sense of your voice tone and your presence through the screen. So it's a mediation, but it's adequate.
Okay. Well, I think we're at about the point where we would wind down. I wonder if there's any last things you'd like to say or a message that you'd like our listeners and observers to take away.
Well, I think I would. Why would anybody take up a journey like this to become something other than what you already are? Like, what's the real purpose of living a worthwhile life? And I decided for myself that the most important thing was my ability to have access to myself on the way inside, David, where I could be moved by you, and I would have the ability to move you. Like, to me, that is the greatest commodity that we have to become more and more human. And the story that I always think about was a writer from Outside Magazine had a chance to interview Carlos Castaneda near the end of his life. It was one of the last public interviews that he was said to have done. And so this writer was excited about getting a chance to meet Castaneda, and they got together in this little diner in Northern California and sat down, and they had this great interview, and he realized the conversation was coming to an end, and he wanted to find another question, one more question, and he said to Castaneda, if you could ask your teacher Don Juan one final question, what would you ask him? And he said, with that, Castaneda became more subdued and sat for a while, and he didn't know even if he was going to answer him. He came out of that and he looked him in the eye and said to him, if I could ask Don Juan one more question, I would say, how was he able to move me so? What allowed him to live in such a way that now my life is filled with, every beat of my heart is filled with this journey? How did that happen? How did he transmit that to me? And to me, that's the quest that I feel like I'm on, that, from the teachers that I've had, that I want to learn how to do, and I want to help others do this process of awakening the hero potential in all of us. And then together we find out what we're doing when we have it all awake.
Well, this has been delightful. And I really wanted to enter into this interview in a way in which we could experience each other. And I felt humbled by what I read on your site. And so it felt like an appropriate risk and journey too. So thank you so much for being my guest.
And David, it was my pleasure, because it was a delight to feel you join me, and I really enjoyed sharing our time together.
Great. Thank you.